Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And if it's okay with you, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to a work which has been released by Criterion, designated at spine number 1089. This is the work from 1998. The filmmaker is Hirokazu Kore-eda, and the name of the work in Japanese is Wonderful Life, or in English, After Life. This is the work from 1998, and among its incredible cast are people such as Arata and Erika Oda and Tsusumu Terajima and Kei Tani and Takashi Naito and Taketoshi Naito and also Kyoko Kagawa and others. This is the work, the sublime, incredible, so moving and genuinely powerful work in a lot of ways from the great filmmaker and artist Hirokazu Kore-eda. And the name of this work is Afterlife, or in Japanese, Wonderful Life. The work, Wonderful Life or Afterlife, is such a unique and peculiar one because it has so many aspects to its plot and its propulsion that make it, I think, a blend of so many different things. Focusing in on the plot, we are brought to this particular area, or this seemingly looks like an office building or a school or some kind of administrative body or organization of sorts. And it has the environs of a type of Japanese schoolyard or something of the sort. And I'll get to that momentarily because it's brought up in a really fantastic commentary track, which is part of this Criterion collection set, or this release. But we are introduced to this particular situation and this setting, this environment. And very soon, and almost immediately after the film begins, we begin to realize that this is a very special place indeed, because we are introduced to the people who seem to be working there and the group of people that are visiting for 1 week. And this is a very intriguing, special, and important week for those visiting, those concerned, because we soon realize that this place, this building, this world that we are introduced to, is indeed this world between worlds. It is the place where people go after they die, but before they move on into the other realm, the afterlife, what lies beyond. Here is a type of way station place, and the people who work at this particular place are assigned a number of these visitors, these people who have recently departed. And here they are as they are walking, living human beings, except according to the plot, we understand that they have recently died. And the crux of the plot here is that each of these persons who have passed away is given or is assigned to a particular, say, a person who works here, and working together, they talk about the departed's past life and memories, with the goal of this particular person choosing an important memory in his or her own life, and that memory will then be filmed it'll turn into a type of short film, and then when the person who has passed away sees this film, then he or she will then, at that very precise moment, go off into the other realm, the beyond, the afterlife, with that memory that they have seen embodied or recreated in a particular film that they see here at this way station. So once again, once they see this filmed memory or memory as represented in this film, then they go off into the afterlife. And so with that goal or objective in mind, over the course of this week, the people who are working there have to discuss with each of these dearly departed, so that they can reach a particular memory that is so important to them that they will want to cherish it for the rest of eternity. And so it has to be a very important one. And so in order to get that particular place, then these people have to talk it out with the counselor and to see exactly what the memory is, what the details are, what the specific circumstances were of the memory. Are there any aspects of the memory that might ring true or truer than other parts? Are there aspects that might seem a bit false or maybe on the verge of being fantasies or lies? What is the historical context of these various memories? Who are part of these memories? Who are the important people that figure into these memories, etc.? So this is a very fascinating perspective and approach to this concept of a type of what happens after one dies. And here we have this idea also cross-cutting into a sense of memory and a sense of recreation and a sense of past and a sense of recalling and recollecting. This is one aspect of it, because the film also deals with the stories of the particular people who work there, the counselors, and the people who are portrayed by such actors like Arata and Susumu Terajima and Takashi Naito and Kei Tani, and also Erika Oda. And in particular, we understand that due to a certain set of circumstances, maybe there are aspects of these counselors' lives that also become revealed as they are talking with the dearly departed who are now visiting this particular way station area and staying here for this particular week. Maybe there is more to the lives of these counselors than initially meets the eye. And then we see, perhaps, or we get a sense of the way in which the physics of this particular world work. What are the kind of rules of the afterlife as presented here? Is it, well, does it have maybe it's not necessarily a religious connotation as much as a sense of a type of a place of maybe administrative bureaucracy that is played out in the hands of these people who are human beings, and they have their little details and idiosyncratic moments and moments of quirky, say, humanist characteristics that are also embellished by a sense of emotion, a sense of real attachment to those around them and also their own lives. And perhaps we understand that their experiences are also a part of what the overall project of this particular place is, namely trying to get at a sense of memory, trying to hold on to a particular memory, or perhaps not being able to remember, and maybe what the consequences of such inability to remember, or perhaps it's not an inability, perhaps it's a purposeful not wanting to choose a particular memory. And again, this type of, say, detail is, I think, made very significant depending on which character or characters we are dealing with when we are encountering all the various people that we meet, and each of their memories or each of their stories, and what it is that it means the most to them, either in the past or in the present, or perhaps never at all. And perhaps what it was in the past is something that is forever in memory. Is it real, or is it somewhat of a falsehood? Is it reality, or is it fiction? Or does it even really matter? Because in the end, what we are given in this particular story is a real sense of a humanistic core. Kore-eda and company are giving us these lovely, lovely portraits. some of the participants we understand based on, say, some of the supplements we will find in this Criterion Collection release. Some of the participants or some of the characters are portrayed by professional actors, and they have very distinguished careers, or perhaps from this film they will continue to have distinguished careers in the field of acting and film and cinema and theater and television and the like. But some of the people that we see also, we understand, were selected from a group of people that Kore-eda had maybe interviewed or prepared for interviews in preparation for this work, which thus gives the film a sense of a documentary style and perspective. And we understand too that Kore-eda has his background in terms of documentary filmmaking or documentary TV making or TV shows and the like. And in that way, this film feels like it is really straddling the line between what is real and what is fiction, or what is the dramatic that is portrayed in the realm of fiction. And perhaps what is real is not always real, because it is also something that is, of course, captured, or it's captured not in a documentary style, but everything is prepared. It's a story. There's a camera there which is placed. There are lights. There is a sense of the artificial as well. But there is always that feeling, that knack, that sense, maybe almost the uncanny feel, that whenever we see this film, there is something of the real there, within the artifice, or maybe embedded at the very heart of the artifice, or something that comes through because of the artifice, is the sense of the real or the authentic, which is an amazing accomplishment. And it goes towards, I think, one of the great strengths of cinema, which is the use and application of artifice in order to try to get at something that is true and real and genuine. And I think this film presents that in a whole myriad of levels. Of course, the directness of the plot is one level, but also we have to remember too, and also I mentioned too, the way in which this film seems to blur the line between what is real and what is fiction, what is documentary versus what is the dramatic part of the film. And sometimes, as I say, those connections are overlapping in an incredibly complex and fascinating way. And yet also this film turns, I think, that concept on itself in a very meta fashion, because we understand too that this is a film that is also about filmmaking. The conceit of the world is that the memory has to be created in this type of film, and so we see part of the work Afterlife dealing with the details of the film production. What are the pre-planning processes? What are the special effects that are used? What are the in-camera props? What are the, say, budget limitations? Because this feels like a conversation in cinema language that is also very much limited by certain budgets. And so this is also about the filmmaking process. And so I think that is also another layer that is very much connected to the idea of the inherent power of cinema. Again, we see the artifice, we see the fakeness of it all, and we understand that it is made up. But that does not in any way take away from the genuine power of what what these little short films are trying to represent, because they are trying to represent memory. And when we see the participants, or the dearly departed, the various people engaging with the set, talking with the people, the filmmakers within the film, and we see their eyes as they're looking. For instance, there's a very famous sequence involving the making of a particular memory, involving a plane flying through the sky, and the clouds, and the idea of the clouds being some kind of, these balls of cotton that are on string, but at the same, and against this painted backdrop of sky, and yet at the same time we see the eyes of the participant looking through and looking in the cockpit, etc., and seeing the type of awe and wonder that this experience is generating. And so there's, again, the idea of a film within a film, cinema itself relying on artifice, making it very clear that we are living in a world of artifice, and yet at the same time, or because of that sense of artifice, we are getting at the the heart of the matter, at least for this particular person. And it's so fascinating too, because we get these various implications as to what is real, what is fake, every part of the way, and what is genuine and what is not. And yet there's nothing, it all builds towards one single aim or purpose, which is trying to get at the heart of something, the presentation of some kind of humane thing, or the respect for the people that are sharing with us their very cherished memories. So this is an incredibly deep and moving work. And I should say too that there are many other layers at present here. Excuse me. For instance, there is also a sense, and we'll get to this when we talk about the commentary. There's also a sense that maybe there is an attempt by Kore-eda in the assembly or arrangement of these particular interview subjects that is trying to maybe get at something to do with the sweep of Japanese history. There are some participants that are talking about events, very dramatic, significant events in Japanese history. The Great Kanto earthquake comes up for one particular person. The end of the Pacific War, World War II, comes up for another person. And then the immediate post-war period comes up yet for another person. Not for everyone per se, but there is a sense of a type of sweep of history throughout the 20th century. And so we are we are very are honored, or I feel very honored that these people who are involved in Afterlife are very willing to share with us a little bit of their lives and what it was that they were experiencing many years ago. And these are obviously very cherished memories. They're very personal. They're very much individualized, and yet at the same time they are part of the passage of time and history, which is a very important aspect here. History and time. And speaking of time, that is another aspect, another layer here, which is the way that time itself passes in this film, how time, the passage of time, that concept is somehow captured within the film's boundaries. And we get a sense of the week passing. We have title cards that indicate the day of the week, starting from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., in Japanese kanji. But we also get the sense of a type of time or inexorable sweep towards some kind of destination. And this is also true when we get to the dramatic elements of the film, especially with regards to the characters portrayed by Arata and Erika Oda. So their characters are Mochizuki and Shiori, respectively. And as I say, they are counselors, or maybe one is a counselor and another is a type of counselor in training, as it were. But in any event, they have a particular story, and there's a sense of time and inevitability and time running out. As well as a sense of the paradox, which is the notion of what it is the afterlife and the world beyond brings with us, brings with the notions that are associated with. Because after all, the afterlife in eternity is indeed eternity. So there's this inherent paradox between the finite amount of time that we see presented here within the space of whatever it is, a week, versus the idea of what lies beyond and the infinite. So there is that really fascinating duality or discussion or engagement with the sense of, or the capturing of, the passage of time, again within the boundaries of Kore-eda's cinema. And then I should say ultimately too that the film does talk about the notion of memory and the importance of memory, and also how memory can be this ephemeral, fuzzy, maybe difficult to grasp thing. And it might change, and depending on who we are at a given point in time, maybe our memories too will change. And indeed, Kore-eda himself, when he's interviewed in one of the supplements, one of the great supplements on this Criterion release, he speaks about this. He speaks about how when he's remembering now, back on the film versus what he might have thought of when he was making it, maybe it's changed. And so there's this idea of memory itself being this organic thing, and it the way that we think about our memories of the past might change or might be affected depending on who we are and where we are at a given point of time in our lives. And so there's a sense of the organic, there's a sense of the ever-living, and there's a sense of the change. And within that change, there's also the possibility of things like forgetting. There's also the possibility of getting things wrong. There's also the possibility of maybe saying little tiny lies in order to protect ourselves and to protect, maybe preserve some kind of secret, or to maybe protect our sense of pride, or to maintain a sense of privacy, etc. And these aren't terrible things inherently in and of themselves, but they are also themselves reflections of our own humanity, or the humanity of the people who hold those memories or who hold those fantasies and who want to keep things secret. And so this is also very much a tale of type of a human psychology, and the way that people react to memory, and also the way that people recount memory and how people remember memory. And there is this continual type of discussion between the person and the memory, as it were. And that discussion can be ever changing, ever evolving as time passes. So again, everything comes back to time, everything comes back to memory. And there's a possibility of truth and fiction, reality and fantasy. But ultimately, and also truth, fiction, artifice and the truth, but ultimately, and all captured within the cinema of afterlife. And ultimately, though, it is always, always, always about the capturing of the humane spirit, giving enough room and respect for the people who are participating, talking about their lives, as well as type of reflection, if you will, that is blended over into the world of the dramatic storylines and the character arcs that we see with the particular characters here. For instance, as I say, Arata Susumu Terajima's character, etc. And we get those details, I think, presented very warmly, very earnestly. And sometimes also there is a sense of the cold, and there's also the sense of the cold, hard truth when one is confronted with it. And so there are the highs, there are the lows, there are the disappointments, and there are the triumphs. And this is all about human life. And my goodness, when we have a story that is like this, that has this sense of the beyond, and has a sense of the need to capture something of the essence of one's life before one departs for what lies beyond, that is such an intriguing concept. And it makes one think, it makes me think as well, what memory would I choose if I were confronted with this particular situation? What memory would you choose if you had to choose only one? It is a very profound statement, and it makes one think about one's life and one's impact, or maybe lack of impact, and maybe really makes us examine who we are, or who we think we are, and our lives up to a given point. This is such a personal film in so many ways. It is such a complex film in so many ways. It is like a puzzle. It is there's things that are true and not true, things that might trick you, but it is all for the ultimate point or objective or goal of displaying or showing or getting at something that is human, humane, something genuine. This is the extraordinary work from Hirokazu Kore-eda, which is the film Afterlife. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Wonderful Life, or Afterlife. It's by number 1089, purported to be based on a new 2K digital restoration, approved by the writer-director Hirokazu Kore-eda, and with uncompressed monaural soundtrack. Now, this is a very striking-looking work, and it's, I think, it looks really great in this particular Criterion presentation, and it sounds great as well. The Criterion release also, as per custom with many a Criterion release, as we know, is also packed with a number of very fascinating supplemental information and materials. So let us explore what they are. The first is, I should say, a commentary track, and this is described as being a new commentary track from 2021. Linda C. Ehrlich, PhD. And Linda Ehrlich's commentary track is really splendid. She is an expert on the works of Kore-eda, and she is a great expert on this particular film. And so I strongly encourage you, if you've seen the film and if you're interested, please check out the film with the Linda Ehrlich commentary track. She does a fine job in, for instance, highlighting some of the key phrases or terms or words in Japanese that are used throughout this film. It is a Japanese film, and so the language spoken is Japanese. And Linda Ehrlich talks about some of the key words that are used. So this provides, I think, really good foundational, say, context for some of the maybe nuances or intricacies that might lie within or embedded maybe beneath the surface of this film. So it's really fascinating, and her explanations are fantastic. She also talks about a little bit of background in Kore-eda's career leading up to Afterlife, and also the shooting schedule and the production details of this, TV Man Union and Engine Films, and a 35 days film schedule shoot, and also the idea of composition and the treatment of people who are, on the one hand, either actors or ordinary persons. And the idea of this is a film that is about memory and filmmaking, documentary and fiction, etc. And she also talks about how Kore-eda might often be compared to the filmmaker Yasujiro Ozu. And so this is very important. But what she also mentions a little bit later in the commentary track is that perhaps Kore-eda himself might prefer the reference to a different filmmaker, which is Naruse, Mikio Naruse. And I find this comparison between the works of Naruse and also the works of Kore-eda, in particular Afterlife, to be so profound and so important that I'm so glad it's mentioned here. So, the works of Naruse also, I think, are really foundationally and critically very important if one is considering maybe a broad comparative examination of Kore-eda's work in the context of, say, Japanese cinema or 20th century Japanese cinema. So wonderful observation. I'm so glad Linda Ehrlich made mention of this. She also makes mention of other films as well, and the maybe comparison that this work can have with other works like, say, the Ernst Lubitsch film Heaven Can Wait, or the Wim Wenders film Wings of Desire, etc. And also there are some great comments to, say, for instance, the great film El Sur, Victor Erice's film El Sur, etc. So these are wonderful connections that she is making, again, within the context of not just Japanese cinema, but also cinema from other parts of the world. So fantastic commentary. She also mentions how this film is almost serving as a type of tribute to filmmaking itself. We did talk about the idea of films within a film. And this is important. The idea as well of space and non-space, or filling up the space versus the emptiness of space. And she mentions here the idea of treating emptiness as a type of metaphor, which I thought was so what a beautiful way of putting it, because there is inherent in the idea of sort of the idea of Japanese. Maybe a sense of the importance of kind of a focus on, say, the concept of what it might be referred to as nothingness. And so, and this concept, I think, has its expressions also in, say, the works of Naruse and also Ozu in particular. And here in Kore-eda's work, we have the sense of the notion of the empty chair or the empty theater when the lights are back on, or the idea of people that we are talking about that are not there. And that's the same thing too about death and what that does. People who are around us but who are no longer around us because they have departed or they have passed away. And so there is a sense of the non-space being so important as well, and the idea of although there is something of an emptiness there in terms of physical space, there is still something perhaps of the living or the traces of what was once a life, and that is also translated into a sense of memory and a sense of thinking back. And so what a great way of phrasing it by Linda Ehrlich, very much so. I also mentioned too about how this film might be seen to be a type of approach to Japanese history, and Linda Ehrlich does make mention of this as well, how there were perhaps earlier plans in the production of this film where there might have been a more specific, organized sense of a sweep of Japanese history, 20th century history. And ultimately, we get some stories from some participants that have their links or roots in the type of portrayal of Japanese historical events, but then those aren't all the stories. And so there is mention of how perhaps the structure of most, if not all, the film would have been about history. But although maybe that's not the case for the entire film, there is still remnants of that within in very key recollections from very key participants, as we know. So that is still surviving in the final form that we see it in the film. But as I say, Linda Ehrlich's comments here are really illuminating in that way. She also mentions too the cinematographer, the director of photography, Yutaka Yamazaki, and the idea of the documentary background, the TV documentary background that he had, and also the work of Masayoshi Tsukita. And Tsukita's work can be seen both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Now, he's probably focusing, or he is focusing more on the dramatic recreations of the memory parts, and then Yamazaki's work is focusing on the rest of the film, which has a type of almost a documentary type of feel, or structured documentary type of feel. It's not a documentary per se, but so we have these two cinematographers. Tsukita also can be seen in front of the camera. He has a role that's captured in a component of this work as well. So Tsukita's work and Yamazaki's work is also mentioned by Linda Ehrlich in this great commentary. And also there is this idea too of childhood and the way in which childhood is treated, either in terms of maybe some of the childlike characters that we meet throughout the course of the film, and or the memories of childhood that a lot of the people have or seem to have. And so this idea of childhood and the treatment of childhood and the handling of childhood and the importance of childhood is something that we see here. And indeed, it's something that we will see or that is present arguably in a lot of other works by Kore-eda. So what a great commentary track. I have to mention just one thing though, which is the commentary track makes comments, obviously, or Linda Ehrlich makes comments about a particular scene. She makes comments about all the scenes, but there's one scene in particular which comes at the end of the day of Tuesday. And as we know, this film is divided into essentially days of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, over the course of a 7-day period, more or less. But there's a particular moment that comes right around, I think, the end of Tuesday, and it involves the characters of Mochizuki and Shiori, again, the Arata character and the Erika Oda character. And it comes after a particular moment where the Shiori character has been taking a bath, and there's this idea of submerging oneself in the warm water, and how this is connected with a conversation that happened previous to that scene about somehow maybe being able to recollect the memories of one's youth even as a newborn baby. And so it's a kind of fascinating aspect. And again, that's also very important in the character of Shiori, the young woman who is part of this group of counselors. And we understand maybe as some of the layers of her character are revealed, we understand perhaps why she is so eager to do this, because of a certain situation that maybe she finds herself in. But in any event, after this particular moment, we go into, it's now nighttime again at the end of the day, and we see the other character, Arata's character, Mochizuki, making phone calls about a particular case that he has, the case of Mr. Watanabe, played by Taketoshi Naito. And we get a moment where Shiori, the young woman, walks in, and we see her from the side profile, and then we get shots of Mochizuki talking on the phone at his desk with the night lamp. And it's a very interestingly composed shot, because we're not quite sure what the space is, where the people are in the particular frame as the editing makes it out to be. So it's not quite clear, but when we take a step back, we understand actually that Mochizuki is sitting at his desk here, and kind of behind him, diagonally behind him, Shiori is actually looking not towards him, but actually outside through the window. And we can tell this because we can see the lamp next to her, and we get a shot from behind. We also see that same lamp next to the window. So it's very clear that he is sitting at the desk and she is standing looking out of the window. Now, Linda Ehrlich makes mention of the fact that possibly she is from profile looking at Mochizuki, which is not the case. She's actually looking out of the window. And when we get a cut back of the scene, she makes mention of the fact that perhaps this is Shiori's point of view, where in fact it's not. She's actually still in the shot, because we can see the window and she's actually looking out. So I'm not sure exactly I'm not exactly sure the circumstances of this particular comment, but I can perhaps maybe again, I just bring it up. It's maybe a very small point, but Shiori is definitely in the room, and she's looking out of the window. She's not looking at Mochizuki, and this is not, I think, her point of view or POV shot. Although maybe one could make the argument that maybe this is something that she is thinking or something. I'm not sure. That's something that I think might be worth further investigation. But in any event, that is a very small detail, and it is a overall incredibly robust, fantastic, and powerful, and so informative, and brilliant commentary track from Linda Ehrlich. So please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because then we get in the supplement section, we get a one-on-one interview with Hirokazu Kore-eda himself, and this is described as being from 2021, approximately 19 minutes, and it is called "A Memory is Not Like a Fossil, Hirokazu Kore-eda on Afterlife." And this is so great. It's so great. He speaks about his family, he speaks about his parents and his grandparents, and also in particular his grandfather. And when Hirokazu Kore-eda himself was maybe around 5 or 6, this was perhaps around the time that his grandfather was ill, and he probably was, according to Kore-eda, he probably was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And this, of course, has a lot to do with the concept or notion of memory and looking back, or perhaps the ability or inability to look back, and how that perhaps is also related to the way in which people see the world around them now. And then Kore-eda talks about his own parents and his own family growing up as a child, and the idea of maybe things weren't always so happy. There were fights and that sort of thing. And so this, and also he's talking about it in the context of his grandparents too, I think. And so this, I think, also has a very fascinating connection with the concept or the story subject matter of afterlife, because it also paves way for the possibility of things not always being happy. But that's not to say that it's in any way any less significant or any less important or any less powerful in terms of a moment in one's life, in terms of one's sense of oneself, in terms of one's humanity. So, but he also talks about it too in the context of memories and cherished memories. And then he's mentioning about his background leading up to being a filmmaker for a film of afterlife, and how he was working as an assistant director in a particular project, and how this in a documentary type of project, and how he had to use the VHS videotape footage and watch footage of someone's life or scenes of someone's life, and how this perhaps gave him the idea of maybe we could have the videotapes, VHS tapes, being a record of one's life, and you could just put in a videotape and that would show the particular point in one's life. And we actually have that, of course, with the story of Watanabe in the film Afterlife. And so he talks about that being maybe a kernel of an idea that then blossomed into a very key aspect of this particular film. And he talks about his work at TV Man Union, and how he was working with a particular person at TV Man Union, and he learned a lot of lessons there about not relying on narration to do the explaining. Let the images do the talking was something that he learned from a mentor there. And he talks about how he learned this lesson of he shouldn't make films for large, what he said is described as being large unseen audiences. So don't make films for large unseen audiences, this mentor taught him. Rather, make a film with one specific person in mind. And Kore-eda now looks back on that and other aspects of this, and he says that this was really important for him, and how it changed his fundamental way of thinking and seeing. And we can see echoes of that, very strong echoes, in fact, when we watch Afterlife now. And also, speaking of Afterlife, he does mention how perhaps it could have been, or he was thinking about it maybe as a 1 hour type of drama about this period of life, or this, not life, but period, the 7-day period. But then it developed into something larger, which is the feature film here. And there were, he was talking about the interviews with the actual people, and Kore-eda mentioned something really interesting here. He says he has no way of knowing if what they were telling him in the interviews was real or not. He had no way of checking this, but he has no way of knowing. But that's, for him, that's not the point. The point here is that he has, as a filmmaker, he felt he needed to be faithful faithful to them, because the whole point was about how faithful they are to reality, and how that can achieve something that is cinematically beautiful. And I thought that was a really profound and beautiful way of describing it, and it really, I think, brings the point home about how this is about many things: reality, fiction, documentary, drama, maybe truth, artifice, fantasy, and lies versus what is real and what is genuine. But maybe it's all genuine. Maybe it's all getting at something of the humane and beautiful and powerful. And so I think that statement by Kore-eda really sums it up so nicely. And he also mentioned something really interesting too about the place, and what the place actually was, and that what they were looking for in terms of a look was a type of wooden building structure that would remind people of a ordinary looking school in Japan. And it has that effect. It wasn't a school building necessarily. It was like a government related building, in fact, but it looked like a school, and they shot it like a school, and has the announcements like a school, and people are walking from room to room like a school hall. There's a sense of the school band playing, and and the sense of graduating after the end of this week for people who have decided on their memories, etc. So this is, I think, a really very important point, and also links so beautifully to the notion of this film also tapping into something that is part of, say, something of Japanese culture or Japanese lived-in culture. Again, the school life, the idea of the bell, the idea of some kind of orderly sense of going to particular rooms, the way that the signs are sticking out over the doorways there. These are little details that are very reminiscent of Japanese school life, and so that is such a great thing that he brings up here. And he also talks about working with his cinematographer, and this is Yutaka Yamazaki, and there are some interesting stories about Yamazaki and his background as a documentary cinematographer and his use of film stock. And in fact, there's a nice little counter to that story that we will see in another supplement, again with Yamazaki. So, and he also talks about working with Sukita, the other director of photography, shooting his work dealing with the fiction scenes, etc. And so there needed to be a difference between the fiction scenes and then the quote unquote the interview scenes. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think that divide or that juxtaposition is captured so perfectly in this particular cover art design. The top part of the cover art design is actually a shot of this chair, which is a shot from the film itself, and so this can be said to be from the eyes or the POV or the point of view of Yamazaki, whereas the shot below we understand is a photograph, and this photograph is part of the work that Sukita also did for the film, because he's also a photographer. And a very famous photographer, and so we can, and this is depicting something that we understand is part of the fiction part of the film, and so this is the Yamazaki viewpoint, and this is the Sukita viewpoint. That divide is captured perfectly in this cover art, and again, that's very important as far as the look of the film or the looks of the film. Yes. And also he says, Kore-eda says here, in terms of memory and thinking back, when people change over time, memory changes as well. I thought that was so fascinating, and it goes back to what the title of this interview is. Memory is not like a fossil. It is not fixed. It is not set in stone, as it were, but it also changes. It also is subject to evolution based on one's own, say, growth or growing up, or the passage of one's own life over the years, etc. And so and then he says he might have had recollections that might have been different if you had asked him in a different part of his life, but when he was talking about the film now, these are his recollections now. And I thought that was so beautifully said, and it's a wonderful way to wrap up him and his approach to memory and thinking back and this film. What a great conversation this is, again with the filmmaker Kore-eda. It's approximately 19 minutes. That's not all, because we then get a conversation with Yutaka Yamazaki, and we've mentioned Yamazaki's name before because he is the director of photography, or we should say one of the directors of photography here. He shot maybe what could be said to be the interview portions or the counselor portions of the film, which perhaps over the course of the running time make up the majority of the running time itself. But this is Yamazaki's one-on-one conversation, 2021, approximately 19 minutes. It is called The Distance Between Us, Yutaka Yamazaki on Afterlife. And he speaks a little bit about his background, his history, going to Nihon University, studying cinematography, working in TV documentaries in the 60s and 70s, which he calls the golden age of documentaries on TV, working in TV Man Union, and working on this film, and how he describes himself as being a film fan or a film buff, and he was really admiring the works of Ho Xiaoxian, Edward Yang, etc. And he also speaks about the earlier work, the earlier feature debut, in fact, of Kore-eda, which was Maboroshi, or in Japanese, Maboroshi no Hikari, and how there were some who really praised the film, but there were also some who criticized that film, Maboroshi no Hikari. And so maybe in this film, the next film, Afterlife, Kore-eda would try to do something a little bit different. And one of the things that we understand that Kore-eda did different, which was he had, according to Yamazaki and Kore-eda himself, he had planned a lot of these storyboards in the earlier film, but I think that process was not utilized, and it gave way instead to a different type of filmmaking process. And so this is actually something that Yamazaki says can be attributed to Ho Xiaoxian, who says it's not about the storyboards per se, but it's he says where the set is where the film takes shape. And so this is, I think, a great reflection of Kore-eda's film style, working style in Afterlife, at least as we hear it from people like Linda Ehrlich and Kore-eda himself, and also Yamazaki here. And he speaks about how the shoot itself, Yamazaki describes the shoot itself as being a very calm shoot. There wasn't a lot of yelling, there wasn't a lot of fighting, and so there was a kind of tranquility about the place, which also I think is very, it doesn't surprise me, especially when we think about the way in which the film turned out, and the tone, and the feeling and the atmosphere of this film. And also he speaks about Sukita and his participation in the work. And also speaks about the importance of collaboration among artists in order to create this type of project. And he speaks about his philosophy of the filming of the particular interview scenes. He says he didn't want to intrude too much, so he had it pretty much fixed. There are a couple of exceptions which he acknowledges, which are really fascinating exceptions in and of themselves. But overall, in general, he speaks about a type of structure that he had. I should say here, too, that there is maybe one very, very minor error in the subtitling, which comes at the tail end of this particular interview. It's not an error that is attributable to Mr. Yamazaki himself, because his comments in Japanese, it comes at the tail end when he's speaking about the storyline that exists between the characters that are portrayed by that are the characters of Watanabe, Ichiro Watanabe, and his wife, and Mochizuki. So there is a kind of there's a sort of a relationship of sorts. It's a dramatic story that occurs between and among these three characters. And Mr. Yamazaki in the interview mentions Naito-san. In Japanese he says Naito-san, and this is referring to, he says, Mr. Naito in Japanese. But in the subtitles, the phrase or the name Naito-san, as said by Mr. Yamazaki, is translated into English in the subtitles as Takashi Naito. Yamazaki is not talking about Takashi Naito. He's actually talking about the other actor whose name is Naito, Taketoshi Naito. There are two actors in this film whose family name is Naito. There's Takashi Naito and Taketoshi Naito. Takashi Naito is the person who plays the character of Sugie, who is one of the counselors in this film. He's the counselor, for instance, he's the one who's talking with the woman with the large flower on her costume. So that's Sugie. That's the actor played by Takashi Naito. The character Watanabe is portrayed by Taketoshi Naito. Now, this is the actor that Yamazaki-san is talking about. So when he says Naito-san, he's referring to Taketoshi Naito. But unfortunately, the subtitles at that particular moment don't say Taketoshi Naito. They say Takashi Naito. So that's an error. It shouldn't be Takashi Naito. It should be Taketoshi Naito. But again, errors happen, and so it's a very minor one. But in any event, at that point, Yamazaki-san is talking about the characters that are portrayed by Arata and Kyoko Kagawa and Taketoshi Naito. This is the Watanabe-san character, his wife, and then the Counselor Mochizuki character. So, but it's a very important point that he brings, because he's talking about the sort of the maybe a kind of love triangle of sorts element of the story, and that's another example, I think, of how great this interview is with Yamazaki. So please check it out if you can. It's really, really great, and he teaches us so much. Oh, and also he does give a little bit of a counter to that story that was mentioned by Kore-eda about his use or overuse of film stock, and so it's interesting to get a little bit of a different perspective on that particular detail. A lovely, lovely detail, by the way. So please check out this interview if you can. And that's not all, because another interview we get, another great one, is with Masayoshi Sukita. This is from 2021, approximately 15 minutes. And we've mentioned Sukita's name before because Masayoshi Sukita is the other cinematographer that is very important in this particular production, Afterlife. He's also a photographer, which is also a very important detail. We'll get to this momentarily. This great conversation or discussion or interview is called Eternal Time, Masayoshi Sukita on Afterlife. And he's talking about the camera and how the camera and photography is so important to him. And he says about how he discovered photography and how it had a lot to do with his family and his mother and his upbringing at the time. And he shows a particular photo. It's so moving what he says about it, and he says, "This photo is my everything." And when you look at that photo and you hear a little bit of description, it's such a moving thing, and that's at the start of the interview, and it just so that's an indication of just how great this interview is. And he speaks also about his going abroad, going to New York in the early 1970s, and discovering photography, and also discovering what he calls pop art. And at the time also he mentions meeting and working with the great Japanese filmmaker Shuji Terayama, which is an amazing thing, right? And in terms of the play, off-Broadway play, that Terayama, the filmmaker, also writer, author, poet, artist, playwright, etc., had at the time. And then this led to their collaboration on the Terayama film, which is known in English as Throw Away Your Books, Rally in the Streets. Now, one of these days, I would love to talk about that film. That is one of the great films. But it's so great to hear Sukita's mentioning of that. I was so happy. I was already happy with this particular release, but that was just another reason for me to feel happy. And going on, Sukita talks about his he talks about film photography and digital photography, and he talks about the relationship between the other director of photography, Yamazaki, and Kore-eda, and the idea of how he was participating in the production. He was actually there. As I say, he was one of the crew that is captured on the film itself, working, planning with a particular scene with Mochizuki's character, etc. And so that's great. Also, Sukita's talking about his photography work and how he took a lot of photographs. And this is very important because this was also captured in some photo books and photo journals that he published, and it also gives us the opportunity to also hear about his other photography career, especially his work, for example, with David Bowie. And so now we also get his comments about taking photographs here on the set of Afterlife. And indeed, when we get this particular cover art, as I mentioned, we have the top and the bottom, and we can say that the top part represents maybe Yamazaki and the bottom part represents Sukita. So this is Yamazaki's eye and this is Sukita's eye. Such a great and clever way of presenting it. And indeed we have the leaflet, the foldout, which I'll talk about momentarily, but these also, we understand, are photographs of Sukita. And so it's great to have these details as part of this overall package. Really wonderful. So this is a great conversation with Sukita-san, Mr. Sukita, and it's another way to see the working relationships on set, also his involvement on set, and also the nature of his work and history. So splendid, so well done. So please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because then we get, as another supplement, a deleted scene section, which is titled Treasure of Memory, totaling approximately 16 minutes. And this is focusing on the character of Gisuke. And this is the gentleman who we see in the film, and he likes to talk maybe about his past sexual escapades and sexual prowess with the various women that he's met over the course of his life. And so here we get some more scenes that aren't in the film, but that focus maybe on little details like the opening of the gate to start the morning, maybe lunch break. There's an interesting section of lunch break where we see the various participants at tables talking with each other. And then we also get a focus, as I say, primarily of this elderly gentleman, Gisuke's story and his acting out, and there's some interesting exchanges and his dancing, etc. And there's also some scenes involving playing mahjong with some of the other people who are at this way station area. And then there's an interesting, almost comic interlude of sorts that is involving him watching, or perhaps not watching as the case may be, the films as part of the theater experience that's captured in Afterlife here. And so that is a nice little coda to this particular section of deleted scenes. So it's primarily focusing on this particular individual or character, but in fact we get some other details from this way station, etc., that don't emerge. There's some shots, for instance, of the counselor people maybe sitting on the rooftop, just taking a break, etc. So those moments, I think, are really fascinating. Overall, 16 minutes, really well done. And then we get the trailer that ends this particular collection of supplements. It's a really lovely trailer. Well done indeed for being able to include that. And I already mentioned this earlier, but here we have the fold-out here. And the fold-out is, as I say, it's the fold-out type, and I'm not a fan of the fold-out type. I would prefer to have the staple booklet type, but that's okay, because the fold-out type is a really splendid one. Well, not the fold-out type, but this particular fold-out has a splendid essay, and it's by Viet Thanh Nguyen. It's called In Memoriam, and this essay is another brilliant essay. It hits all the beats. It is so well written, very well expressed, and I recommend it, of course, after you've seen the film. But once you've seen the film, please check out this essay. Great to have it here, In Memoriam. And I do want to say something to the art direction and the design here. This is art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer Efron Miller, cover and packaging photos Masayoshi Sukita. And so this is really lovely. So the photos are Sukita. There is a really lovely detail, really lovely detail. And you open the case. It's right here. Now you have this side, which is for the leaflet, which I've already taken out, and then you have the disc here, and you can see the disc is Afterlife, and it has the moon. Now, if you've seen the film, you'll know that the moon has a really interesting appearance in this. And then when you take the disc out, what do you see but this? That is so wonderful. And if you know the film and you know how the moon is used in the film and you know this particular shot, you'll know that this is a really clever way of integrating the moon. Really, really clever way of integrating the moon into this particular release. I thought that was such a charming detail. It just made it just. I was already taken by this, but Criterion threw in that little detail at the end there. I was just, yeah, I was over the moon. So it was. That's a great thing, and that's another example, I think, of just the overall package and this presentation of this film. I love this film. I really, really love this film. I have spoken about this film on this channel, in fact. It was a live stream a year or so ago. And at the time, I recall I might have mentioned how I'd seen this film. So this is a work that I saw in the theater so many times when it was first released, and it was amazing. It was so amazing. And now I watch it and I continue to be amazed. I continue to learn. I continue to be in awe of this triumph, this clever, this very it's also very how should I put it? It is very modest, and it's very discreet, and it's very tranquil, and also it's so powerful, and it's so moving, and it's quite awesome in the range and depth of emotion that are engendered when one watches this film. This is a film of true power and depth, and comedy and sweetness, as well as some darkness and some ambiguity. But always, ultimately, it is a film that is seeking or yearning or searching for, ultimately achieving a sense of the portrayal of the humane and the humanity of the people that are within its borders and its boundaries. What a lovely film this is. This is the work by Hirokazu Kore-eda, and it is the work Wonderful Life, or in English, Afterlife. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.